welcome. In this video we'll look at what can be expected from a 10-year-old Tesla. The pros, the cons, and is it worthwhile considering buying one? So for our discussion we have a 2014 Model S with an 85 kilowatt-hour battery pack that has driven 253,000 kilometers. And overall the car still looks quite good. The paint is original, it has not gone through any major accidents, and as you can see on this side it is quite clean. Let's see what it looks like in the back. As you can see, it states the 85, so that is, at that time it was still the size of the battery pack, and since it has nothing in front or after it, it says that it's a single motor 85 kilowatt-hour vehicle. So on this car, on this side the car has some damage, nothing major, and for a 10-year-old car I think it's quite good. The exterior of this generation is called the nose cone because of the front fascia. It was later facelifted with a new bumper, new headlights, and minor changes around the car. But this particular one is the first generation Model S. So it still has a physical key, so cars that were produced back then still had physical keys rather than the cards that replaced the keys later on. It has the retractable door handles. All four of them on this car still work. Most likely several of them have been repaired or replaced in the meantime, but at this time they still work. So on this particular one it is a combination of leather and cloth, and back then Tesla still used real leather rather than the synthetic leather that followed, and it's still in quite good shape. Let's see in the back. The back is clean as well, no major signs of wear and tear. The only sign that I have identified on this particular car is the driver's seat right here. It has some wear here, but other than that it's still quite good. So what else can be expected from this kind of car? A huge trunk. Yes, the trunk is huge on these cars, with a big advantage of having a hatch. So as you can see, the volume is quite impressive, and on the top of that you still have some extra space where you can either hide the cables or some extra storage compartment that can be used as you wish. It has an electric liftgate, and what is interesting, it has a huge trunk as well. So if we open in front, since it does not have a motor in front, it leaves a lot of space for the front trunk or the frunk. So this 10-year-old Model S has this very specific frunk. Because it doesn't have a front motor, the frunk is even bigger than the cars that followed, because after 2015 the frunk got slightly smaller up until here, and in most cases there is a second engine, a second electric motor that is located around this area. Okay, I suggest that we move to the inside now. So inside we are welcomed by this huge screen that is impressive even by today's standard. And what is even more interesting is that there is a second screen which does not exist in the Model 3 or the Model Y, and it has quite a lot of information on it. So it has information on the latest trip, it has information on the consumption as well as the range that is left on the car, and also some information that can be dynamic in terms of maps that can be chosen by the driver. If you look at the big screen, so in this particular car, it is the first generation MCU, so what is called the MCU1, and it is rather outdated as compared to the newer models. Yet I think if we compare it to other makes and models or other brands, it still has a lot of information and a lot of functionalities that are quite interesting. For example, there is Spotify, there is a really nice high resolution rear camera, so a lot of information, and you can navigate through the screen on the left side in terms of controls, pedals, charging, so all that you can see on the screen. So if we look at software, we can see the mileage of the vehicle, 253,000 kilometers. And if we click on additional vehicle information, we can see some interesting information about the car itself. So this particular one has the base audio system. There is an upgraded premium system that was available back then. This car does not have it. It can have a CCS adapter, which is not installed on this car, and with this CCS adapter here in Europe, you can access any CCS to DC charging station, which is quite convenient, and it supports up to 142 kilowatts, if I'm not mistaken, so it's quite precise in the material that is provided by Tesla. But this is the kind of peak speed in terms of charging that can be expected from this car. It has the NVIDIA Tegra processor, so this shows that it is the first generation MCU. And as you can see, there is only one model, so the rear model, which is a big model, the induction large model, shows that it is the bigger version of the model, which is not necessarily a good thing, because they are more prone to having problems, because it has to be cooled by liquid, and the seal of the model can get defective, and there is an ingress of liquid that gets into the model and makes some damage, so it is not necessarily the more desirable model. What else do we have on this big screen? So in terms of controls, we can fold the mirrors, we can open the frunk, we can open and close the electric rear gate, and we can open the charge port. In terms of steering and pedals, we can select the steering mode, so from comfort, standard and sport, and the regenerative braking, either low or standard. There are only these two setups. In terms of charging, so this car right now is, I think, 24-25% state of charge, and it shows 109 kilometers of range. So when fully charged, we are at around 445-448 kilometers of range, and in real life we are at around 350-370 kilometers of range, which is not bad for a 10-year-old electric vehicle, even by today's standard. You can choose when charging begins and set it up through the app as well. And what is a major advantage of this one, it has the 3-phase AC charging. So basically you can go up to 22 kilowatts in terms of AC charging, which is quite rare in today's electric vehicles. So this older EV has this advantage in case you have access to this kind of chargers. Then the vehicle, there are some of the details in terms of how you set up the car itself. There is a child protection lock, as you can see, as well as some notifications that you can select from. Some settings in terms of lights, the display, what you want to see, the language, as well as whether you want to see the range that is displayed right here in distance or in percentage. So as you can see, 24% equals to 109 kilometers in this particular vehicle, as well as other setups like choosing miles per kilometers, temperature in Celsius versus Fahrenheit, and so on and so forth. The trips, so this shows us the trips that were performed on the vehicle, and what is interesting to see here is an average energy consumption over quite a long distance, so 144,000 kilometers, so approximately 90,000 miles, and the average is 205 watt hours per kilometer, which is not great as compared to a Model 3, which is more efficient, but that is a smaller car, yet it is quite impressive when compared to some other electric models. So even by today's standard, this is a very strong performance in terms of efficiency. You can reset those values obviously, and you will always have the current trip. So for example, our last trip was just 1 kilometer, and as you can see, the average is at 200 watt hour per kilometer. The navigation, you set up your navigation, some safety features. So this particular car does not have any front-facing cameras and no radars, so it does not have autopilot. It is one of the first Model S's, and it was prior to Tesla launching the first version of autopilot, after which followed the version 2, 2.5, and then 3 with the full self-driving capability. That was prior to all the autopilot capabilities of the vehicle. Service, so you have some service capabilities in terms of updating the keys, resetting the tire pressure, and so on and so forth. Software, and as you can see here, it is checking for updates, and the last check was performed as we speak. And then some upgrades, and for this particular car there are no upgrades that are available. Moving forward, what else can we see in this car? Well, we can see a lot of physical buttons and spokes. And what is interesting to notice is that the spokes and the buttons are the same that were used in several Mercedes from those years, because at that time Tesla was supported by Mercedes for some of the parts that they used in the vehicle, and in fact the steering wheel is one of them, as well as these buttons, the spokes that are used in the vehicle. There are some physical buttons as well here, so for the warning lights, as well as for the opening of the glove compartment, which is performed in the screen on the Model 3 as well as the Model Y. The materials that are used in the car are quite good. I think that the German premium brands have a better fit and finish, yet I cannot say that it is an unpleasant place to be in. I think that the cabin is a very well built place, and the way everything is set up is quite pleasant. This part here was added later on, so for the 2014 Model S's, there is no compartment, storage compartment in the middle. In fact, it is just a blank area, and in this particular model, this part was added, and basically you can recharge your phone and then store some extra stuff in here. The cup holders are not necessarily the most comfortable, but at least they are here, they are present. This particular car does not have a sunroof. Many of the Model S's of those years had a sunroof and you were able to open it, which is not the case for the newer cars, where basically you have just a sheet of glass that does not open. Okay, so let's talk about the negatives of owning a 10-year-old Model S. Well, to start with, this particular car is a relatively high mileage one, 253,000 kilometers, and being 10 years old, the warranty is expired. So not being covered by a warranty implies that if there is an issue either with the motor or with the batteries, well, it can be quite expensive. And as we said, the rear motor, being the big version, is prone to some issues, and if there is a liquid ingress that gets into the motor, basically it can damage the motor, and you're looking at an expense of around 4 to 5,000 euros to replace it, or around 2 to 3,000 to get it repaired. What is worthwhile knowing is that there are more companies that are able to refurbish them, which is positive for the industry overall. And I think that moving forward, we will see more and more situations where these kind of models just get repaired rather than replaced by new ones. The same goes for the battery. So you can get a battery that will be okay for years and years to come, and over 4 to 500,000 kilometers. In some situations, there are cells that get defective, or some soldering that is defective, and basically the battery can have some issues. The other negative, I think, is the multimedia display. So being the MCU1, it's a slower display. So you cannot necessarily see it here, but I can assure you that when navigating, it is not as fast as you would have it with a later generation display. The other disadvantage is that it doesn't have all the features that you would get on the newer ones. This is why in some cases it is quite interesting to upgrade to what is called the MCU2, so to a newer generation multimedia control unit that will give you some extra options. There is things like YouTube, there is Disney Plus, Netflix, and the big advantage is that it is much faster. And as you can see on this particular one, so there is some glue that is basically coming out of the screen. In fact, we can see it here. So this is glue coming from the screen. So it doesn't have an impact on how the screen works. So everything is functioning, but aesthetically it is not very nice, because you can see this line where the glue has started to come out of the screen. If the screen is upgraded to the later MCU2 unit, both screens get replaced, because in newer generation MCU2 units, the main screen controls the smaller screen, while here it is an independent screen with its own processor, and it is dissociated from the main screen. The other disadvantage, I think, the other negative, is charging. While you are able to access the supercharging locations, charging is slower, and it is limited to 140 kilowatts, but that is a peak, meaning that you will achieve it, and very quickly it will go down, and at a state of charge, for example, of 50%, you will be more around 75 kilowatts, and it will still decrease moving forward. So charging will be slower, even if these speeds are quite good compared to the other car manufacturers for their current models that are being launched, yet it is slower than the newer Tesla models. In terms of efficiency, that is another negative. So if we look at this particular car, the efficiency is 20 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which is okay for most makes and OEMs, so for most models, but you can have something that will be maybe 20% more efficient with the newer model. So if you combine that with a slower charging speed, this means that your trips will be longer, because you will be consuming more, and you will have to stay charging for a longer period of time. On the top of the negatives, there are some known issues to these cars. To start with, I would mention these door handles. As we said, they can go wrong. The good thing about them is that the newer generation door handles are much more reliable, but even the older ones can get repaired. There are relatively inexpensive kits that are online for around 20 euros, and it's a relatively cheap and easy fix. So I would not get scared from buying such a car because of that. The other known issue is the model of wipers. In fact, they can go wrong, and the mechanism would get loose, and you would see, so one of the signs of wear is around the hood in this area. So you may want to check if this area is in good shape. So on this particular car it is, but if there is some damage here, this means that the system either has a problem or had a problem in the past. The other issue that is worth mentioning is the rear motor, as we said. So on the performance version of vehicles, as well as the single motors versions, so the ones that have a big motor in the back, the big motor can have problems because of the seal, as we said, that can get defective and can damage the motor itself. On the dual motor versions, there are no major issues, so they are the more reliable variants of this Model S. Enough with the negatives, let's talk about some of the positives. And to start with, I would say that it's still a quite good looking and attractive vehicle to look at. For a design that is more than 10 years old, I think that it still looks good, even today. Second, it has an aluminum body, and this means that it is not prone to any rust. And as we can see on this particular example, it looks okay, it looks quite good even for a 10-year-old car. The next thing is the space inside. I mean, this thing is huge, it's huge inside, as well as in the trunk. So it still can be quite a very comfortable family car and even an excellent alternative to an SUV. So for those that are not really keen on getting an SUV, I think that it's an excellent choice to go for this design with the practicality of the rear hatch rather than having a simple trunk. Now the next one, I think, is the access to a great supercharging network. I think it's still a huge positive for Tesla because you get that many locations and you can still access all the other locations that are available to everyone. Another positive is still related to charging. I think that the route planner on Teslas is much better than on any of the other makes and models, and being integrated in the vehicle, it makes it just so much easier to travel with these kind of cars. Should you get a 10-year-old Tesla in 2024? Well, it depends. It depends on whether you're looking for the latest tech and technology in a car. In that case, obviously this car is not for you, because even the entry-level Model 3 or Model Y have a later tech and much more entertainment features, autopilot features than this car. If you're looking for something that is much more unique on the streets, that is relatively practical, and you're happy to live with the anxiety that comes with an older car in terms of issues, because the battery can go wrong, the motor can go wrong. You can have relatively cheap fixes for the battery as well as for the other parts, yet you have to be aware and be ready that these can occur someday. But I think that in the low 20s, and this is what this car can go for nowadays, I think that it is an excellent choice, and it can be a much better choice than some of the entry-level models from some other automakers, because it gives you a decent range, because the battery was so big, so even if it lost some of its health during the years, it's still plenty to travel. So you can go to anywhere basically in Europe as well as in the US, if you're in the US, and not have the range anxiety with this car. You can have access to the Tesla supercharging network, which is a huge plus, and you can take all the family with you. So hope this video was useful. I think that this is a solid contender for a relatively cheap electric vehicle, and it can be even quite a nice alternative to newer models, especially if you want something that is quite different in the traffic, because they are not as popular. You cannot see them all over the place as you can with the Model Ys and Model 3s. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video.